important to do that as a nation. That's why we're here.
안녕하세요 여러분. 수요일 아침입니다. 오늘 햇살 너무 좋네요. 진짜 아침 일찍 일어나면은 이렇게 좋아요. 운동하고. 오늘은 아침 7시에 일어나서 아침밥 푸짐히 먹고 씻고 지금 스트레칭이랑 스쿼트를 좀 했어요. 영상 찍으면서 팔굽혀펴기 하려고 준비를 했습니다. 지금 아직 10시가 조금 안 됐어요. 팔굽혀펴기랑 하도록 하겠습니다. 그렇네요. 뭐 특이사항 있나요? 특이사항은 없습니다. 특이사항이 없네요. 진짜 특이사항이 하나도 없네. 코로나는 여전히 300명대 이상이고 31일까지 거리두기 연장이 됐고 설날까지 하겠죠. 아무리 200명대가 간다고 해도 설날까지 하고 설날 이후에도 일주일 정도 더 할 것 같아요. 그렇네요. 저는 아직 학원을 못 갑니다. 영어 학원을 가야 되는데. 일단 팔굽혀펴기 하겠습니다.
And lingering fears that some may harbor insurrectionist beliefs themselves. That's where we are right now, on this achingly beautiful night, what is still one of the most inspiring places on earth, at a very dark moment for the country, very rough times ahead for the new administration, and as you might imagine, a busy hour to come. We begin with CNN's Arlette Signs on the National Mall. So Arlette, this is obviously going to be an unprecedented inauguration for a lot of different reasons. Where are the President-elect and Vice President-elect tonight, and how are they preparing?
Well, Anderson, President-elect Biden is spending the evening with his family at Blair House, which is located just across the street from the White House. And they're spending time there after having that memorial here on the National Mall to commemorate those 400,000 lives that have been lost to COVID-19. And the first time that we will see President-elect Biden tomorrow will likely be when he heads to Mass at St. Matthew's Cathedral, a Catholic church down in downtown Washington, and it will be a moment of unity. The president-elect has invited all of the congressional leaders, both Democrat and Republican, to attend that church service with him. Vice President-elect Kamala Harris will also be there for that moment that will also have personal significance for Biden, as he will be the second Catholic to become president just a few hours later. But having those congressional leaders with him there at this moment just signals his desire to bring unity to Washington, D.C. And then he will make his way up to the Capitol, where he will be taking the oath of office outside on the steps of the west front of the Capitol. The president-elect has been adamant that this inauguration take place outside, even amid security concerns. And really the big moment from the inauguration will be that inaugural address. That will be one focusing on a theme of unity. Biden, from the very beginning of his presidential campaign, painted himself as a unique figure that could unite the country, and that is something that will come through in his remarks tomorrow as he becomes the 46th president of the United States.
I understand there's reporting that the Bidens weren't even sure the Trump administration was going to invite them to stay at Blair House, which is tradition. What happened?
Well, the Biden family had originally planned on staying at a hotel here in the Washington, D.C. area. But last week, they did receive that invitation to stay at Blair House on the final night before the inauguration. That is an invitation that has to come from the outgoing administration. And history has had it in the past that most presidents have stayed at Blair House before their inauguration. So that invitation came a little bit delayed. It's unclear exactly why, but they are staying there in that historic home this evening.
And as of noon tomorrow, President Biden will be able to take executive action on a number of issues. Do we know what some of those initial moves will be?
Well, the president-elect is making it clear he wants to get to work right away, and his team has readied roughly a dozen executive actions for him to sign on that very first day. And some of these executive orders will focus on undoing policies of the Trump administration. That includes rescinding that ban on travelers from Muslim-majority countries, as well as rejoining the Paris Climate Accord. That was something that was negotiated during the Obama-Biden administration. There are also other items relating to the pandemic. Biden will be signing an executive action that would mandate masks in federal buildings and interstate travel. But the president-elect is also aware that he cannot do everything through executive action, and there is much that he wants to accomplish through Congress, and that includes that COVID-19 $1.9 trillion stimulus relief package. But one thing that Biden will be battling when he takes office is that he will be pushing these items through while that looming Senate impeachment trial is taking place. His advisors have said it's imperative that that trial go and operate on a dual track as legislative business so his agenda can move forward.
Excellent, appreciate it. We're now on the security picture, the extent to which some threats or people who are threatening the president-elect could be among the National Guard presence there. And breaking news just now coming to light about the insurrection itself. They come from court documents unsealed today in the first significant conspiracy case of what could be many more. Federal prosecutors alleging that 3 members of the so-called Oath Keepers, an extremist militant group, planned and coordinated ahead of the assault. The charging papers, quoting messages sent during the siege that appear to indicate the attackers were searching for lawmakers in hopes of making citizens' arrests. It's not the only troubling new development. The bigger story tonight. For the latest, I want to go to CNN Shimon Prokupis, who's been reporting out each new and troubling development. So, Shimon, how confident are officials that they have a full grasp of these alleged plots connected to the insurrection?
Yeah, I think, Anderson, what we're starting to see from court documents that are becoming public as the arrests are being made, that authorities probably have a really good idea about who some of these groups are and who is part of these groups. Because remember, a lot of them were filming this as they were doing this. They were posting it on Parler and Facebook and other social media. So authorities have been really going through all that media. And of course, they've gotten over 200,000 tips at this point. And also, quite frankly, it's some of the stupidity of these people, right? They're not wearing masks. And then they're also identifying themselves. But also a key thing we learned today in terms of the Oath Keepers, they were wearing patches on their paramilitary gear identifying what group they belong to. So that certainly has helped authorities identify them. So that's why I think it's pretty good to say that they have some idea about who many of these people are. Also concerning, of course, here is that the chatter about QAnon conspiracy theorists urging their followers to put on National Guard uniforms. The Washington Post saying that was something that intelligence officials were concerned about. There are layers and layers of security here, so to think that someone could possibly get away with that would be probably difficult, but of course authorities are concerned about. And of course the insider threat, Anderson, that is something that authorities here are concerned about. 12 National Guard troops who were expected to be part of this deployment, they were pulled off of it. The authorities here would not tell us exactly why that is. They said not all of them had extremism views, but out of an abundance of caution, Anderson, they did remove them from the deployment.
And tomorrow, what should people expect to see as dignitaries start moving around Washington in the morning? I mean, it's not going to look like anything in past years.
No, it's certainly not going to look like any security event ever in this country, Anderson. And where I'm standing here behind me is actually, it's a checkpoint that tomorrow will be operational. We're actually not far from Blair House, where Joe Biden is staying. Some blocks further away from us here is the White House and Blair House. This entire area is fenced off. So tomorrow it's going to be even more difficult for people to come through here. Of course, I think even though because of the pandemic, people are told not to come to the inauguration, I think city officials do expect some people to try and come see whatever it is they can. So in light of that, with all this fencing, all the security around us, it's certainly going to be much harder for people to move around the district, Anderson.
Shimon Prokupis, appreciate it. When our next guest played his part in the peaceful transition from one administration to the next, no one could imagine the country could be any more divided than it was. Hard to believe that was 20 years ago. not hard to believe that then Vice President Al Gore would do the right thing in conceding a very close, very hard-fought loss to George W. Bush, which is why his perspective is so important tonight. Mr. Vice President, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me, Anderson.
You hear the latest reporting from Washington, you see those images. Could you ever imagine that in this country, there would need to be some 25,000 National Guard troops guarding the Capitol on Inauguration Day to protect the new president, not from a foreign terror threat, but from violent insurrectionists led, encouraged, and lied to by the outgoing president?
Well, it's necessary under these extraordinary circumstances, Anderson, but I have to tell you that those images pale in comparison for me to the very deeply emotional images from the reflecting pool with all of those flags and the lights and the I feel the emotions welling up in me as I'm describing it. All of the 400,000 Americans that we've lost, and Joe Biden has a healing heart. He's been through so much, and I'm just deeply moved that he and Kamala Harris would start this round of activities with such a moving display, and how wonderful that they have invited the bipartisan leadership of the Congress to attend a worship service with them tomorrow morning before the inauguration.
I think it's really important what you point out, and I mentioned at the top of the broadcast, but it really struck me tonight what a contrast we're seeing between the current president and the new president. The fact that the president-elect and the vice president-elect went to the Lincoln Memorial tonight, honoring the more than 400,000 Americans who have died from COVID. I mean, it is in such stark contrast to what we have grown used to, the ignoring the dead. This is a president who, as you said, understands loss, who speaks the language of loss. And to start out his ascendance to power by recognizing those who are no longer with us is an incredibly powerful thing.
Incredibly powerful, and it is a clear indication that not very many hours from now, at noon Eastern time tomorrow, he will be the leader of a country that is hurting and is in need of healing. He takes power. He will be taking power at a time when we have to mobilize to get this pandemic under control, when we have to address the racial injustices and the economic hardship that has become so severe, and address the climate crisis and the other problems that have been ignored for these last 4 years.
The incoming Obama administration faced an unprecedented economic crisis. Do you think the Biden administration faces an even greater challenges?
Well, in some ways, yes, because the economic devastation the pandemic has visited upon our country is deeper than what we suffered during the so-called Great Recession. Yes, and the multiple crises that are piled on top of one another. Yes, and I think we're very fortunate that among the many experiences that Joe Biden has had is the experience of leading on behalf of former President Obama the recovery from the Great Recession. He knows what he's doing, and he has appointed an outstanding team to help him. I would say it's not only an A team, but an A-plus team. And we saw some of the testimony today with confidence.
28 years ago tonight, you were getting ready to be sworn in as vice president. 20 years ago tonight, you were preparing to attend George W. Bush's inauguration. That was as contentious an election as anyone had seen at the time. But after the Supreme Court ruled on the election, you were gracious in defeat. When you certified the results in the Senate, announced the results, you followed it by saying, "May God bless our new president and our new vice president." You had George W. Bush over to your residence for a visit during the transition. What is your reaction to how the current president has treated the incoming president?
Well, it's unfortunate. It's regrettable. Sadly, it's probably not surprising to many people. It's unfortunate. I'm glad that we are going to have a fresh start and move away from the violation of norms, from the disrespect to the Constitution and the American people. We have a big challenge ahead of us, and I think President-elect Biden, so soon to be President Biden, understands that very clearly.
How does one bring a country, and maybe it's not one person doing it, but how does a country get brought together when tens of millions of people, good and decent people, believe that the free and fair election was not free and fair? I mean, they're wrong. They don't have evidence. This was a lie propagated by the president, the current president, but they believe it. I mean, the outgoing president, won't admit he was lying to them. How does a country come together when you have that kind of division?
Well, as the Republican leader in the Senate, Mitch McConnell, said eloquently today, the mob was fed lies, but not only the mob, the supporters of the president who were not part of the mob have also been fed lies. It's shocking that such a large percentage of Republicans still, according to the polling, tell people that they don't yet accept the election. I'm hoping and expecting that they will, because this is hardly the first time that the side that has lost a hotly contested election is called upon to put aside partisanship and lift up
오늘 여기까지만 하겠습니다.
our country in its place. We're America.
몇 개 했지? 화급표 리허설 몇 개 했죠?
We rise to
100개 안 한 것
challenges
같은데.
like this. We've done it for so long. And the ceremony tonight was so moving, as I've said.
어쨌든 오늘 여기까지만 하겠습니다.
Is one of the most
힘들어.
important and time-honored rituals of American democracy. And I think that